The rain came on just like guilt does, slow and never-ending. I was 10 minutes past quitting time when the hospital's automatic doors exhaled me into the downpour. The parking lot lights stood like tall, shaky ghosts, and the asphalt sparkled like a million shattered mirrors. I promised myself I'd go home, microwave something from a box, sleep for maybe 4 hours, and be back before the coffee remembered how to be cruel. I made a lot of promises to myself. The rain, of course, didn't listen to any of them. Crossing the Hawthorne Bridge, I turned off the radio and cranked the wipers up all the way. Water braided the air together, and the steel beams ticked and groaned. Portland smelled like wet iron and pine trees. The river below looked like one long dark muscle. He materialized out of the heavy rain a step, then another staggering out of the left lane and right into my headlights. I had just enough time to do exactly one thing, believe what I was seeing. I slammed on the brakes so hard my seatbelt felt like it was trying to punch through my chest. The tires let out a screech, the car fishtailed, and the stranger threw up an arm to shield himself. The horn screamed into the night. We froze there, everything shuddering, my Corolla, his hunched-over body, and the whole world lost in a white hiss of rain. He was soaked completely through, and you could practically see every bone in his body. Early 30s maybe. Dark hair plastered to his forehead. A white dress shirt that had turned gray, clinging to him and torn in places. Blood. And not just rain had dried into a brown pattern across his left side. I turned on the hazard lights and opened the car door. Rain smacked the interior like I was being scolded. "You're going to get hit," I yelled over the storm. "Move." He blinked like he was trying to translate what I'd said. "Please don't call the police." His voice was even and careful, the kind of voice you use when you're talking to someone who might be holding a bomb or a loaded gun. I've been an ER nurse for 8 years. Bodies speak to you if you know the language. The angle of his body said rib pain. The way he kept his right hand close to his waist said wound. The tremor in his jaw said shock. And his eyes, tired, watchful, said he'd made a conscious decision to be there and hadn't counted on my headlights. "You're bleeding," I said. "It's not all mine." I didn't ask the obvious question that came next. The bridge didn't feel like a place where obvious things were safe. "Get in the car." I heard my mother in my own voice, which felt unfair to both of us. He hesitated for a second, then slid into the passenger seat, carefully holding his side. I slammed the door, and suddenly the car was a fragile, warm little bubble. The rain shut out, pounded on everything else. "I'm Mara," I said, because names make people real, and real people tend to live longer. He looked at the dashboard, at the glow of the speedometer. "Call me Evan." "Call you Evan?" "For now." He smelled like river water and pure panic. I pulled off the bridge into the first turnout, my hazard lights blinking in the darkness. "I can take you to the ER. No hospitals." There was a hard edge hidden in the soaked cotton of those words. "I work at one. That's what scares me." The interior lights made his cheekbones look even sharper, almost gaunt. Blood had already spread through the shirt near his ribs. I popped open the glove compartment and took out the small emergency kit I kept there. The one that made me feel like I actually had some control over things. "Lift your arm." He did as I asked. Under the torn shirt, the wound was a shallow cut with a jagged edge, like metal had given him a bad kiss. Not a bullet wound. It wasn't deep enough for that. More like a graze from something glancing or a fall onto something sharp. No spurting blood. No bubbling breaths. I could deal with this. I cleaned the wound, rinsed it out, and put on gauze. His jaw tightened, but he stayed still. "Field dressing on a bridge," he murmured. "You've done this before." "Not here," I said. "Mostly bars, parking lots, family kitchens." "You're very calm." "I'm very tired." He almost smiled. Far off, lightning split the sky. The thunder was late, like it had been stuck in rush hour traffic. "Who did this to you?" I asked. He looked past me, through me, into whatever was beyond the rain. "Someone who thinks everything has a price. And you don't." "I know some things don't." He paused. "Do you ever feel like the world is an aquarium, and you're the only one who remembers the ocean?" I taped the dressing in place. That sounds like blood loss. Maybe. I should have dialed 911 right then and there. I should have done 100 things that would have looked good on a report. Instead, I pulled back into traffic, taking the ramp toward the east side. We drove in a wet tunnel of white noise, both of us aware of the space between what had already happened and what we were willing to say out loud. After about 3 blocks, I noticed the black SUV in the rearview mirror. No headlights, just proximity. A shadow that matched our speed and stayed with us. Friend of yours? I asked. Evan didn't even turn to look. No. The SUV drifted closer, like a shark circling when it's getting ready to feed. Something old and cold uncurled in my stomach, the same feeling that had woken me up the night my sister didn't come home. The same feeling that had never really gone away since. I took a sudden right onto a residential street where the trees were older than the people renting the houses. The SUV followed. I made 2 pointless turns. Followed again. Seatbelt, I said. If you plan on keeping those ribs intact. He clicked it without a word. I don't drive fast often, but when I do, I drive like a woman who's heard too many monitors flatline. We squeezed through a gap just as a city bus lumbered into an intersection. The SUV hesitated long enough to choose risk over patience. In the brief darkness of the side street, Evan leaned his head back and closed his eyes. You're thinking hospital now, he said. I'm thinking safe now. Same thing. Sometimes. Not tonight. Then where? He told me an address on Southeast 28th that I knew as a row of old duplexes, worn down by good intentions and moss. I left something there, he said. What? The kind of thing people follow you for. Which wasn't really an answer, but it was the truth. I made 2 more turns and let instinct take over, doing what all my training couldn't. Choosing the road that felt like a rejection. We lost the SUV under a canopy of maple trees shedding leaves. I cut across to Belmont and then into my own neighborhood, where porches wore their plants like jewelry, and people had learned to wave like they were offering an apology. I didn't drive to the address he'd given me. I drove to my apartment. Detour, he said softly. House call, I said. Mara. Evan. We looked at each other through the car window, which had become, for a moment, a mirror. The rain softened like the sky was catching its breath. I turned off the engine and listened to the hot metal ticking as it cooled down. Somewhere a train moaned, like someone clearing their throat. Somewhere the SUV was still watching us with its slow, patient eyes. You can take the couch, I said. You can use my shower. You can explain why I shouldn't pick up my phone. I can, he said. But you won't like the truth. I like it more than the alternatives. He followed me up the stairs like a shadow that had learned to be careful of light. When we got to my door, he stopped. Do you ever get the feeling, he said, that a door has been opened for you without your permission? All the time, I said, sliding the key into the lock. But this one is mine. The lock clicked. The door swung open. The apartment seemed to inhale us. And somewhere below, on the street that had never even learned my name, a car idled in the rain. There are rituals for welcoming a stranger into your home. Mine were pragmatic. Towels, a trash bag for the soaked shirt, a spare t-shirt with a faded Mariners logo that no one had ever earned, a blanket that smelled faintly of sleep. I set the first aid kit on the coffee table like a priest setting down a portable altar. Bathrooms down the hall, I said. If you pass out, try to fall toward the bath mat. It's the only thing in there I'd trust. Evan stood there like a soldier dismissed from formation. Thank you, he said, as if the words held more meaning than they showed. He nodded and disappeared. I locked the deadbolt, pulled the curtains closed, and only then did the tremor finally find my hands. I breathed the way I teach families to breathe when their loved ones are being wheeled away. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 6. The metronome in my head clicked along. My phone vibrated. A text from Nadia. You off the grid, Whitlow? We got a weird one. A second text. Guy came in DOA, water in his lungs, blunt trauma. Said one word before he went. Ledger. A third after a pause. Also your favorite Hollowell hovering. Of course, I said to the room. The shower hissed. The apartment fogged up slightly, the air filled with the scent of eucalyptus from an old bottle I'd never bothered to throw away. I looked at the photo on my mantel, me and my sister Stacy, in raincoats we'd sworn weren't identical. We were 12 and 10. We were invincible. We were wrong. The bathroom door opened with a sigh. Evan had the blanket wrapped around his shoulders, the mariner's shirt on, his wet hair pushed back with his fingers. Clean, he somehow looked even more dangerous, like the mess had been camouflage, and the person underneath had lines etched into his face for making tough decisions. I retaped the dressing. The graze was clean. He watched my hands like they knew something he'd forgotten. You're good at this. I'm paid to be good at this. And when you're not paid? I still am. He glanced around the apartment, cataloging exits and edges. You live alone. Most days. That a joke? A truth with room for air. He smiled properly this time, a quick, surprising thing that made him look his age, and then stole it right back. What happened on the bridge? I asked. He wrapped the blanket tighter. I went to meet someone for an exchange. I wasn't the only one who showed up. An exchange of what? Something I took that belongs to someone I don't respect. How much money? It isn't money. I waited. He gave me the soft thud of his silence. Then what? I said. A story, he said, and that more than the blood, more than the SUV, made something prickle behind my eyes. A story of payments moving through a hospital like a second bloodstream. A story of fake patients and real ones whose names get borrowed. A story about a foundation that heals exactly no one. I felt the ground shift an inch under my feet, as if my apartment had been gently lifted and set down slightly out of alignment. You worked there. I worked around it. He tapped the dressing on his ribs. Accountants are surgeons with spreadsheets. We open bodies most people don't know are alive. And now someone wants their story back. They want to erase it. You said you left something at an address. He nodded. A hard drive. Ledger files. Proof. And you wanted me to drive you to it. It felt safer than walking. I thought about the photo missing from my mantel in the only future where I'd left him on that bridge. I thought about Hollowell leaning over Nadia's desk like a man inspecting a cut of meat. I thought about the word ledger coming from a dead man's mouth. My phone buzzed again. Nadia. You seeing this storm? Feels like a movie trying too hard. Call me. Someone followed us, I said. Black SUV. Evan's eyes went still in a way that wasn't fear. It was math. They don't like improvisation. Who are they? The people who taught me to be careful with pronouns. And the police? He shook his head. I can give you names, but not the kind that help. You can give me one. He understood I meant his, not theirs. He took too long to answer, which is its own kind of answer. My name is Evan, he said finally. And it will be until you need it to be something else. You're infuriating. I'm trying to stay alive. So am I. We stared at each other like people who were learning a language by immersion and pride. Sleep, I said. Tomorrow we get your hard drive. After that, we see whether your story is surgical or fatal. You're not calling the cops. I'm calling someone, I said, thinking of Detective Lena Cross and the way she had looked at me once, like an apology she wasn't ready to give. But not yet. He lay down on the couch as if he were negotiating with gravity. I can't promise you won't regret this. I already do, I said. It's not the same as undoing it. He closed his eyes. I sat in the chair opposite him, my hands wrapped around a mug I hadn't even remembered making. Outside, the rain went on, the city rinsed and never quite clean. At 3:11 a.m. Someone tested my doorknob. I didn't breathe. Neither did Evan. The knob turned once, twice, then stopped. Footsteps on the stairs. A door below opening, closing. The quiet after someone tries to break in is worse than the attempt itself. Evan opened his eyes. No words. We were past those. Tomorrow had arrived early. We left before dawn, the sky a bruise thawing toward blue. I dressed in scrubs because scrubs make people look like they belong, even when they don't. Evan wore his damp courage and my old windbreaker. The street smelled like rain that had given up. Instead of the address he'd suggested, I drove us first to the hospital. He didn't argue. He just watched the mirrors. The ER at that hour is a cathedral of fluorescent mercy. Soft beeps, stainless steel. Coffee that has lost all hope and memory. I signed in like a ghost clocking back into life. Nadia caught me by the nurse's station. Her curls defying every known law of physics. You look like a secret. I brought one. I nodded toward Evan, who had found a corner and made it look like a strategic position. Nadia's eyes narrowed. That your ledger, boy? You texted me. Because a man drowned on dry land while muttering accounting terms. Hollowell's been in here twice tonight asking if you're on shift. He does that thing with his hands when he's pretending not to touch anything. Evan thinks somebody's moving money through billing. Then he's met a hospital. Through a foundation, I said. With fake patients. Nadia's smile was quick and cruel. So the foundation is the disease. We need proof. You need coffee, she said, and handed me a cup she'd murdered with cream exactly how I like it. And maybe a warrant. Where is Detective Cross? Nadia tilted her head toward triage. Talking to a Jane Doe who was found near the river. Alive barely. No ID, but her wrists have old ligature scars. And her pupils look like someone else's problem. Something deep inside me reached for a wall and didn't find it. Can I see her? Nadia gave me a look that said I'd already made up my mind. 2 minutes. I left Evan with instructions that were mostly lies and slipped into triage. Detective Lena Cross stood at the edge of the curtain. Rain still on her coat, her attention even narrower than the 4 drip slow patients. She's the kind of woman furniture respects. Whitlow, she said without turning around. You off shift or on? Neither, I said. Both. She cut me a glance that weighed me and found the same number as yesterday. You were on the bridge last night. Is that a question? It's a statement you can choose to disagree with. I choose not to. Her mouth thought about smiling and then changed its mind. A body turned up near the east bank. Male. Head wound. No ID. Someone saw a black SUV leaving the area. I saw a black SUV, I said. Of course you did. She stepped back so I could see the Jane Doe. Early 20s. Hair shaved unevenly. Like a half-forgotten memory of control. Bruises in the shapes of stories no one had believed. She looked at me with the flat, defiant calm of someone who's been taught that questions are traps. Hey, I said softly using my nurse voice. I'm Mara. You're safe here. No, she whispered, not to me. Ledger. The word was a thread thrown across a canyon. I grabbed it. Cross hadn't missed it. You know something about a ledger, Whitlow? I know how to spell it. Cute. She studied me. You look like a woman about to make a bad bargain and call it a favor. I promised someone a shower, not absolution. Is that a koan? It's my life. She let the silence earn its keep. If you learn something that smells like corruption, you bring it to me before it rots. I will if I can, I said, which is the same as I will if you're in a hurry. I returned to the waiting area to find Evan gone. For 5 seconds, every emergency I'd ever triaged became an anchor dragging at my heart. Then I saw him by the vending machines, talking to a janitor like a man who understood maps. The janitor was laughing softly. Evan had bought him 2 bags of peanuts and an apology. Don't do that, I said, the words coming out harsher than I meant them to. Make friends. Disappear. He nodded, accepting the scolding like it was change for a larger bill. We should move, he said. If Cross is here, they'll be nervous. Nervous people break things. Usually people. We're retrieving your drive. Yes. And then we choose who gets to be scared today. The address on Southeast 28th was a duplex that someone had tried to paint cheerful. Someone who believed color could stop roofs from leaking. The upstairs unit smelled like stale bread and fresh regret. Evan had hidden the drive in a place no thief would ever look. Inside the taped-off space behind the dishwasher's kickplate. The black rectangle emerged like a fish pulled up from the mud. He held it like a sacred object. "This is everything." "Then let's not stand here with it like we're in a brochure for poor decisions," I said. We left the way we came, but when we reached the street, a man leaned against my Corolla. His umbrella tilted like a hat. He was handsome in the way money is, untouched by whether it didn't invite. "Miss Whitlow," he said, using my name like a spare room he was letting out for the night. "Dr. Hollowell sends his regards." "Does he send a subpoena with those?" "A car," the man said. He gestured. The black SUV rolled to a stop at the corner, as if it had always been there, and we had just finally learned to see it. Evan's body shifted half a step in front of mine without asking, which told me two things. He wasn't stupid, and we were about to get a lesson. The umbrella man smiled. He had the kind of smile that demanded other people's time. "Let's keep the rain off things that matter," he said. The first drop of new rain hit my cheek. It felt like the world clearing its throat. The umbrella was wide enough for all three of us if we were the kind of people who shared shelter. We weren't. The man's suit had that weatherproof sheen that only expensive fabric gets. The SUV idled like a large animal that knew how to stay on its leash. "Dr. Hollowell is concerned you were distressed last night," Umbrella said to me. "He asked me to ensure you felt supported." "Supported like a bridge or a neck," I said. Evan shifted the hard drive into the pocket of my windbreaker, like he was just adjusting the hem. The umbrella man's eyes flicked to the movement and back, the way a hawk pretends it hasn't seen a mouse. "Ms. Whitlow," he said, "let's not do theater. A certain file has gone walking." Files are like dogs, eager, loyal, yet surprisingly bad at crossing streets alone. We came to collect it before it's hurt. I pictured the ledger as an eager spaniel and almost laughed. "You came to collect my friend from the bridge," I said. "The file is an afterthought. My employer collects all sorts of strays," he said, and tilted the umbrella an inch so rain could find us with more accuracy. "Let's keep this tidy. You hand me what isn't yours. We forget the wet night and the poor choices." Evan's voice was gentle. "You should be more careful with pronouns." "Why's that?" "Because one day we won't include you." The man's smile stayed, but the warmth vanished. "I'll make this easy," he said, and nodded at the SUV. A second man unfolded himself from the back seat, broad, damp, with gloves that belonged to a different season. He wasn't there to talk. He was there to collect. "Run," I told Evan, and then I did a stupid thing. I threw my coffee at the umbrella. It wasn't hot enough to burn, but it was brown enough to blind. The umbrella lurched, the man cursed, the glove took a step, and we were already moving left, then back, then down the narrow side path between the duplexes, where the hydrangeas had grown wild with neglect. Evan ran with his hand pressed to his ribs. I ran with the knowledge that I had invited this chaos into my life, and therefore I could invite it out. We hit the alley, a strip of broken glass and bad decisions. The SUV fishtailed onto 28th and overshot the turn. The big man cut through on foot, fast for someone who had been built for intimidation, not agility. "Keys," Evan said. I tossed him the Corolla fob. "I'll distract," I said. "You'll what?" I didn't answer because math done out loud loses its nerve. I broke right away from the car. The big man made what he thought was the same choice and came after me. Evan veered left, hugging the buildings, and ghosted toward the front. Rain made the world a mirror. We were quick sketches in a wet notebook. The big man's breathing was even professional. He reached for my shoulder. I planted my feet and pivoted the way a soccer coach with too much hope had once taught me. His hand slid off, my elbow connected with his ribs, and his grunt was satisfying and expensive. "Stop," he said, which has to be the least imaginative verb in the language. "Improve your vocabulary," I said, and bolted. The Corolla chirped to life at the curb. Evan slid behind the wheel like he'd been born there. I sprinted and dove into the passenger seat. The windshield showed us the umbrella man re-emerging, coffee splattered, no longer bothering to be polite. The SUV howled. The Corolla is not a howler, but she tries, God, she tries. We peeled away, tires slurring across the wet asphalt. "Hospital," I said. No, Evan said. They expect that. Where then? Where people tell the truth by accident. Is that a place? A library. I almost smiled. Of course it is. We cut across to Belmont and then down to the Central Library, that sandstone giant that had taught me to love quiet. We didn't go inside. Evan used the side street parking not because it was legal but because it was ours for 60 seconds. Phone's off, he said. Battery's out if you can manage it. We're not drug dealers. We're worse, he said. We're idealists with proof. We turned off our phones and then ripped the hard drive onto my lap. He had a small beat-up laptop in his backpack. How long had he been carrying that thing around? And connected the drive with a cable that had a frayed braid that looked like a nerve. Files began to populate like cautious birds. Look for the foundation shell, he said. It's called the Bright River Wellness Initiative. Corny, I know. It's a name that reeks of essential oils. I navigated through directories with names that were basically lies. Development, research, community outreach. Inside were spreadsheets packed with numbers that knew how to stay hidden. Evan's hands moved with the practiced grace of a surgeon whose body trusts their instincts. Cells lit up. Columns revealed their secrets. This wasn't just a simple case of fraud. I almost wish it were. It was theft with a curator's touch. Real patient MRNs attached to fake appointments. Grants directed to pilot programs that never even took off. Vendors with addresses that matched mailbox stores near the docks. And running through it all were recurring transfers to a transitional care initiative that had no staff and a budget that could teach a small nation a thing or two about financial responsibility. Calder, Evan said, his eyes glued to a series of edge references. He's laundering money through shell companies like these. Hospitals are perfect for it. A lot of activity, justifiable delays, and a culture of trust. And Hollowell? Evan clicked into a folder labeled L. The subfolders were organized by month. Inside those were PDFs of board meeting minutes and executive memos. And there it was, a scanned copy of a signed directive from Hollowell, authorizing Bright River's discretionary payouts for patient access facilitation. Underneath was a list of recipients. Some were obviously fake. One was not. Whitlow, Evan said. His voice had that careful, even tone I use when I'm about to say something like, "You might want to sit down." He turned the screen. I saw my sister's name. Whitlow Stacy, Patient Access Facilitation. $4,500. Disbursed 04/17, the year she disappeared. My body reacted without my permission. It forgot how to be solid for a moment, then remembered. They used her, I managed to say, but the words sounded muffled, as if they were behind a pane of glass. They used her name. Maybe that's all it is, Evan said. Maybe. We both knew that maybe was just a weak excuse, a ghost of a possibility. A soft knock made us both jump. Nadia's face appeared at the window, a miracle that smoked and swore. I tracked your car, she said when I cracked the door open. Don't ask me how. Also, are we committing crimes? Because I wore the wrong shoes for this. Get in, I said. We're inventing a better kind. She slid into the back, dripping rainwater onto upholstery that had already seen better days. Her eyes darted to the screen. Oh, sweetheart, she whispered when she saw Stacy's name. Her hand found the back of my shoulder and stayed there. We need a copy, Evan said. We need 3. And then we need to decide who deserves to know this truth and who can handle it. Cross, I said. She can use it. And Hollowell can bury it, Nadia countered. No, I said, feeling a surge of anger I didn't recognize, but also a sense of resolve that I did. Hollowell can watch it crawl out of the grave. Sirens wailed in the distance. The rain softened as if the sky had heard bad news. Time's up, Evan said. He unplugged the drive like a diver cutting a line. Where to? Home, I said. We split the copies. We don't all die in the same place. We drove. No SUV. No umbrella men. Portland side. The ledger files sat in my lap like a sleeping animal that was about to wake up hungry. Detective Cross showed up unannounced, which is basically the same as being invited. She tapped on the glass with 2 knuckles the way cops and childhood friends do. I let her in because my sense of safety had already been shattered. She took in the laptop, the cables, Nadia's posture, Evan's watchful eyes, my face. "Congratulations," she said softly. "You look like people who have proof." "We found a foundation," Nadia said. "Bright River. It's as fake as a toddler's mustache." Cross's eyes warmed a little for Nadia, then cooled. "Sit," she told me. "Tell me everything you're willing to swear to twice." I did. I skipped the bridge for now, that would come later. The ledger. The patient names. The payments disguised as favors to get care that never happened. When I mentioned Stacy's name, Cross didn't look at the screen. She looked at me. "Copies?" she asked. 3, Evan said. "1 here, 1 off-site. 1 with a friend who likes dirt more than people." "Cute," she said. "Chain of custody will be rough." "So is drowning," I said. She let that sink in. "Hollowell?" she asked, finally looking at the screen when I offered it to her. She read the directive, the signatures. He'll claim administrative automation, delegated authority, a mistake at the Foundation's bank. He'll claim everything except responsibility. Then stop him from claiming oxygen, Nadia said. Cross smiled without any joy. Due process doesn't let me pick who gets to breathe. It lets me pick where to dig. This is a shovel. Thank you. You'll move on this? I asked. I hated the desperation in my voice. Yes, she said. But I won't make a lot of noise. They have money, lawyers, and connections. We have paper and a sense of urgency. Urgency only works if it doesn't look like panic. A shadow passed across the curtains. Cross's eyes flicked there and back. Evan's hand moved toward the window latch as if it were a trigger. You have company, Cross said. The doorknob turned once, no apology. A voice from the hallway said, Ms. Whitlow? Dr. Hollowell would like a word. We looked at one another like cards about to be played. Cross moved to the side of the door and nodded at me. I opened it. The umbrella man had washed the coffee off his face and put on a fresh smile. May we? No, Cross said, stepping into view. But you can say hello from there. The man's eyes darted to her badge, and he decided to keep most of his teeth hidden. Detective, he said. What a coincidence. We'll see, she said. Dr. Hollowell is concerned about Ms. Whitlow. The last 24 hours have been difficult for the hospital. He wants to make sure she isn't overwhelmed by outside influences. Like your perfume? Nadia said from the couch. Like hers, he said, tilting his chin toward me. Cross's voice dripped with a coldness that could freeze water. Ms. Whitlow is speaking with me voluntarily, she said. You and your driver can speak with your lawyer. We always do, he said. And so should you. He looked at me one last time, as if trying to memorize the version of me that still believed in happy endings. Bridges are for crossing, he said softly and left. We locked the door. They won't knock next time, Cross said. They'll subpoena you, or search the place, or call you into Hollowell's office to fire you with a donut. They'll try to scare me, I said. They already did. I felt exhausted. How do we make this stick? By not being the only source, Cross said. If that Jane Doe survives, she might tell us what Ledger meant to her. If not, she let the sentence hang in the air. I'll open a corruption inquiry, quiet as a cat. You, she pointed at me. Keep your head down and your temper colder than you think you can. Too late, I said. Try anyway, she said, and let herself out into a rain that had decided to be gentle. Evan leaned in the doorway, looking like a man mapping out escape routes. You trust her? Yes, I said. And I don't know if that's smart. It is and it isn't, he said. That's how you know it's a real choice. Nadia gathered her bag. I'm going back to work, she said. Someone has to keep Hollowell from strangling our budget. I hugged her because there are people you don't wait to thank. Watch your back. Always, she said, and tapped the window where my missing photo should have been. Find her, she whispered. I didn't know if she meant me or Cross or all of us. When we were alone, Evan said, "You should sleep. You should stop telling nurses to sleep." Fair enough. I looked at the ledger copy on my table, and thought of my sister's name trapped inside it like a fishbone. What if she took the money? I asked. It was the thought that had been eating away at me. Then someone offered it to her, he said gently. And people only accept what they've been taught they're allowed to have. We stood there in the soft hum of the pipes and the sound of the rain. I need to know, I said. You will, he said. But not yet. We picked the bar because the dim lighting made everyone look like they'd made better decisions in life. The bartender knew me as a woman who tipped well and didn't drink enough to be interesting. Evan took a booth with his back to the wall. I took the chair that faced the door. We were practicing survival without pretending to be anything other than what we were. Tell me the truth, I said once the drinks arrived. He made a face that looked like he was in pain. Which truth? Who are you? Really? I told you. Not your name. Your real self. He looked at his hands like they were maps of a place he hadn't seen in years. I grew up learning how to spot lies in numbers. I got good enough to be useful to bad people. Then I got tired enough to be dangerous. To them, I said. To anyone near me, he said, holding my gaze as if that was the part he wanted me to remember. Why me? I asked. Why choose me? The bridge wasn't an accident. You were already headed toward my car. I was walking toward the first pair of headlights that slowed down. Lie. He smiled without any warmth. First lie, he admitted. I knew your schedule. I knew your name. I knew your sister's file had been accessed by Bright River. I didn't know if you could handle the truth I was carrying, or if you would run away. I walked onto that bridge to let fate pretend to make the decision. I let the anger wash over me and make itself comfortable. So I'm just a pawn. You're someone I needed, he said. And someone I didn't think I deserved. The honesty stung more than any accusation. I took a deep breath the way you do before diving underwater. Who is Calder? I asked. The man who taught me that there are financial imbalances that no one ever audits. He moves money through hospitals, shelters, freight companies. His brilliance is in his humility. He never takes the biggest slice. He takes the rounding error, the amount that no one notices. And Hollowell? He gave Calder a room with a view. Not out of malice. Out of greed disguised as efficiency. The door opened. Men walked in wearing shirts that had once known an iron. Just the regular Tuesday night crowd. Evan's eyes darted to the mirror behind the bar, and found a sight line that I hadn't noticed. He instinctively touched his ribs, as if checking for a pulse. What? I asked. He didn't answer. He stood up and slid into my side of the booth just as the glass behind us shattered. For a split second, the bar became a violent wind chime. The bullet had come through the front window at a low angle, too low to hit anyone's head. It was a warning, not an attempt to kill. Or maybe just target practice. People reacted the way people do in those situations. They froze, then panicked, then started asking the wrong questions. Evan grabbed my arm in a grip that wasn't about possessiveness, but about getting me out of there. We moved with the crowd toward the back exit. The bartender shouted a name I didn't recognize. Someone was bleeding from a shower of glass. Not life-threatening. Least not yet. In the alley, the rain recommitted to its mission. Evan pulled me to the right. A black sedan at the end of the block turned on its lights, like a thought becoming a plan. We're done being polite, he said. Were we ever? I was, he said. I'm sorry. For what? For using your life as cover, he said, and in that same instant, he pushed me into the recessed doorway of a closed thrift store just as the sedan's door opened and a man raised a camera instead of a gun. Smile, the man said, and the flash went off like lightning. Evan reacted. It wasn't graceful, but it was effective. He grabbed the camera, smashed it against the brick, and broke the man's grip with a twist that would leave the man's wrist throbbing for a week. The man grunted but didn't scream. Professionals rarely do. Tell Hollowell his outreach is clumsy, Evan said, and we were moving again. back through the bar's kitchen and out into a street that looked exactly like the one we'd just left, except for the fresh debris of broken glass. "I need to stop going places with you," I said, out of breath. "You need to start finishing this," he said. "I am," I said, and I meant it. We didn't go home. We went to the only place I could think of that wasn't home and wasn't work. My father's small stubborn house by the docks, where the wind carried the scent of steel, regret, and fish. He opened the door wearing a flannel shirt older than me and a silence that could lift more than any crane on the pier. "You look like rain," he said. "We brought some with us," I said. He eyed Evan the way a longshoreman eyes a container with no manifest friend. "For now," I said. He stepped aside. Then he came by his own coffee. It wasn't an embrace, but it wasn't not an embrace either. We went inside. Dad keeps the house like a man who knows he'll be judged by the tools he leaves lying around. The walls were covered with photos of ships and women who used to laugh in kitchens that no longer existed. Stacy's face looked down from 3 different frames. I couldn't bring myself to count them. "I'm not going to ask why you're here," he said once mugs of coffee were steaming on the table. "I'm going to ask what you need me to pretend I don't know." "Someone is using the hospital," I said. "A foundation. Money that shouldn't be moving is moving. People are getting hurt, but in a way that looks like administrative error." He took that in like a tide gauge reading. "And your sister's name?" he asked, because of course he went straight to the heart of the matter. "On a ledger," I said. "A payment that could be nothing or could be a noose." He pressed his fingers to his eyes, hard enough to leave thumbprints on his future. "Maybe she needed a little help," he said. "Maybe she was in trouble and didn't tell us and took it for a bus ticket to a better life." "Maybe," I said, letting the word hang in the air until it confessed that it was just an empty hope. Evan drank his coffee like a man repenting for his sins. "Mr. Whitlow," he said, "I know I'm a stranger here, and I'm sorry for the meteorological event that seems to follow me. But I can promise you this. If Stacy didn't choose what happened to her, I will help find the person who did." Dad's mouth quirked slightly. "Big words for a man my daughter fished off a bridge. Bigger consequences if I fail," Evan said. The knock at the door was polite enough to be an insult. Dad cocked his head, listened to the silence behind the sound, and nodded at me to stay put. He opened the door, keeping the chain in place. A woman stood there. Late 20s, her hair dyed a shade that resembled a healing bruise. She wore a jacket with a logo that used to signify teamwork, but now just meant a work shift. Her eyes were tired but alert. "Is this Cole Whitlow's place?" she asked. "It is." She swallowed. "I'm looking for Mara." "That would be me," I said, stepping into view. She blinked. "You don't know me," she said. "But I know your sister's handwriting." The room seemed to tilt. "Who are you?" "My name is Raina," she said, and the name itself was like a small storm. "I was at the clinic once. Years ago. I saw Stacy sign in with a last name that wasn't hers. She told me a joke about weather and names. I never forgot it. I saw your photo at the hospital once and..." She swallowed again, as if talking was costing her too much. "Someone paid me yesterday to stop talking about it. That's how I knew I should come forward." "How much?" Dad asked, not because it mattered, but because the number would give him an idea of the kind of people we were dealing with. 500, she said. Cash. Bright River. A man with a smile that belonged to someone else. The umbrella man. Of course. "Come in," Dad said. "And decide if you're staying." She came in. She didn't take off her jacket. People who want to leave quickly often don't. "What do you remember?" I asked. "The clinic was on SE 12th, she said. "Tiny waiting room. No art on the walls, just a calendar stuck on April. The woman at the front desk said they helped with access issues. I told her I needed an appointment with a neurologist for my mother. She said she could facilitate if I filled out a form and agreed to a participation fee. Stacy was in the chair next to me. She said she was there to pick up a check for a friend. She signed for it, but the name on the receipt wasn't hers. It was Whitlow. I said. That's my name. She laughed and said, it's mine today. We're borrowing from the future. Raina's hands were shaking. She stuffed them in her pockets. I thought it was a joke. Then I realized it wasn't. Can you show us the clinic? Evan asked. It's gone, Raina said. Empty. New number on the door. But the stain on the carpet is still there. Cross would want Raina. Cross would weave her into the case, protect her with the law's fragile shield. I wanted to hold her story close and never let anyone in a suit near it. Will you talk to a detective? I asked. If she listens, Raina said. She will, I said, and I believed it. Evan stood up. We need to move, he said. Hollowell knows we have the ledger. Calder will assume we made copies. They'll adapt. We need to see the foundation's money move in real time. And how do we do that? Dad asked. Evan looked at me. We go to the source. Billing. After hours. I have a badge, I said. And a face people are used to ignoring. Perfect, Evan said. Let's go commit some paperwork. Dad grabbed my arm as I walked by. Be smarter than me, he said. And meaner than you think you can be. I'm already both, I said, and we went back out into the rain, like the fools we were and the citizens we wanted to be. Hospitals after midnight are a different world. The lights are dimmer. The floors are quieter. The people who are still there are either really hopeful or really bad at leaving. My badge got us past the first door, then the second. Evan moved like a man who had studied the building plans, because he couldn't afford not to. We took the back stairs to the third floor, where billing resides, a kingdom of cubicles and numbers. The motion sensors activated the fluorescent lights in slow waves. Nadia had texted me a code before we left. Archive room. 4382. Don't embarrass me. We didn't. The archive smelled like paper, toner, and broken dreams. Evan slipped behind a terminal that had been retired but not disconnected. He worked quickly and efficiently. The system blinked, assessed us, and then gave him the access he needed. Watch the facilitation ledger, he said. Watch today. I did. A new entry had been posted after midnight. Patient. Rose Anna access fee. $1,200 memo. Transport plus hotel. The Grace Harbor transitional. Grace Harbor, Evan said. That's one of Calder's shell companies. Anna Rose, I said. That's the Jane Doe from the river. Or someone using her name, he said. We watched as the payment was split. $200 to a rideshare account tied to a burner phone, $1,000 to a prepaid card, both funded through Bright River's operating account, which was, in turn, funded by grants routed from 3 different donor-advised funds that all listed the same contact email. lam@brightriver.org. Lamb, I said. Every wolf needs one, Evan said. I took photos of the screen because sometimes the simplest tools are the hardest to corrupt. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Not hurried, not random. The motion lights outside the archive clicked back on. Evan shut off the screen. We froze. The footsteps paused, then continued, then stopped right outside our door. The handle turned. It was locked. The footsteps lingered for a moment, then moved on, with the calm patience of someone who has all the time in the world. We waited for the silence to return. But it was damaged. Time to go, Evan said. We slipped out and headed for the back stairs. The elevator chimed. The doors opened. Dr. Hollowell stepped out, looking like a man admiring a museum he had endowed. Mara, he said, as if he had run into me in the produce aisle instead of in the administrative wing at 140 mm. What a surprise. Doctor, I said. My voice sounded strange, as if it belonged to someone else, the version of me who doesn't get fired in hallways. He glanced at Evan with the calculating gaze of a doctor who prefers numbers to people. And you are leaving, Evan said. Charming, Hollowell said. Ms. Whitlow, may I have a word? No, I said, because my father had told me to be mean, and because the ledger had replaced my blood. His smile didn't fade. It just adjusted. You think you've found something ugly, he said. You haven't. You've found the engine. Our foundation helps thousands of people. It makes things easier for people who don't have time to deal with bureaucracy. Is it perfect? Of course not. Do I like that? No. But the alternative is that people who need a bed end up sleeping in their cars. And the payments to shell companies? I asked. Vendors, he said. Outreach partners. If one of them is corrupt, we cut them loose. That's what audits are for. Is that what happened to Anna Rose? I asked. An audit? He blinked. It was a tiny movement, but it said everything. I don't know who that is. Then you should find out, I said. He stepped closer. Close enough that I could smell the expensive mint that residents like to make fun of. You're very capable, Ms. Whitlow, he said softly. You know where people break, how long a heart will keep beating if you ask nicely. But you don't know how a hospital survives in a city that expects it to do everything. Let me do my job and you keep doing yours. I am, I said and walked past him, not too fast, not too slow, my badge burning a hole in my chest. In the stairwell, Evan sighed. He'll move money tonight, he said. We rattled him. Good, I said. Let him rattle. Maybe he'll knock something true off the shelf. Outside, the rain was just a memory. We walked across the parking lot under a sky that had forgotten how noisy it could be. A figure emerged from between two cars. Nadia. I changed my shoes, she said, wiggling her dry sneakers. Also, I pulled the access logs for Bright River's donor portal. Guess who logged in from his office every Wednesday night at 11:13 p.m. For 6 months? Hollowell, I said. Winner, she said, and handed me a printout that would make a lawyer's eyes light up. I'm going home before I get fired in the lobby. I hugged her again. She let me. Take care of your pretty head, she said to Evan. It's getting you in trouble. It's not my head, he said. It's my mouth. Even worse, she said, and disappeared into the kind of night that knows how to keep secrets. The morning news had a small story about a transitional care nonprofit under review, with no names mentioned and a photo of a building that could have been anywhere. Cross was working quietly as she had promised. I slept for an hour and dreamed of bridges. When I woke up, my apartment had the particular silence of a place that remembers being entered without permission. I got dressed in jeans and a jacket. Evan's usual attire served as a suitable disguise for any errand. He carried a copy of the ledger in a well-worn messenger bag, a veteran of countless journeys. We made the decision to visit Bright River, feigning interest as potential donors, an image far from our true purpose. The office on SE 12th had undergone a rebranding since Raina last saw it. A fresh sign proclaimed, Bright River Wellness Initiative, Access for All. The lobby had a sterile smell of citrus mingled with the scent of spreadsheets. A woman with perfectly shaped eyebrows greeted us from behind the reception desk. Welcome, she said. How can we assist you? We're exploring the possibility of making a donation, Evan replied. His voice calibrated to the frequency that money recognizes. We'd like to gain a better understanding of your impact. Of course, she said, her expression pleasant but guarded. Do you have an appointment scheduled? Is an appointment necessary? Our impact team is currently quite busy, she replied, clearly amused by her own joke. We were escorted to a glass-walled conference room where a young man, dressed in a navy blazer, presented us with a deck filled with generic stock photos that had probably cost the foundation more than someone's monthly supply of insulin. He spoke with practiced ease about navigators, barrier reduction, and public-private synergy. However, he became less articulate when discussing audited outcomes. Do you serve Anna Rose? I inquired, cutting through the jargon. He blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. I'm sorry, I don't recognize names, he stammered. Of course you don't, I retorted, my frustration rising. Evan, meanwhile, had moved towards the window, using it as a vantage point to observe the activity in the back office. He caught a glimpse of a reflection in the glass. A man hurrying across a corridor with a file box in his hands. The man looked vaguely familiar, the way criminals often do once you've encountered their type. Excuse me, Evan said abruptly. leaving the conference room without waiting for permission. I followed him instinctively, sensing that whatever was about to unfold, it would be worse if he faced it alone. "Sir," the receptionist began, but then hesitated, her eyes darting between us. The corridor led to a door secured with a key-card lock. The young man from the conference room hurried after us, visibly flustered. "That area is restricted to visitors," he said, his voice rising in pitch. "And your donor portal is restricted after 11 p.m. Evan responded smoothly. "You need to leave," the young man insisted, his tone becoming more assertive. "We will," I replied. "But only after you call Mark Lamb and inform him that the two potential donors with questions are growing impatient." The name landed with a thud, like a misfiled invoice. Small but revealing. The young man's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. He reached for the phone on the desk. A voice interrupted, and Hollowell himself emerged from the adjacent office, wearing a suit the color of guilty secrets. "We can discuss this like civilized adults." "Civilized adults don't move money around in the shadows," I countered, my voice sharp. "Civilized adults keep hospitals open," he retorted, his face hardening. "Mr. Lamb is currently occupied with closing a grant this morning. He is unavailable to be disturbed." "Funny," Evan said, a hint of sarcasm in his voice. "Mr. Lamb's email account seems quite disturbed. It keeps CCing your private email address." "Get out," Hollowell snapped, his carefully constructed composure beginning to crumble. "No," I said firmly, standing my ground. Security personnel arrived with the swiftness of a well-rehearsed policy. We allowed ourselves to be escorted to the sidewalk, recognizing that bodies crashing through glass would only make for sensational news footage, not a solid legal case. Once outside, I let out a hollow laugh devoid of genuine amusement. "Well, that was productive," I said, my voice dripping with irony. "It was," Evan replied, his expression unreadable. He was rattled enough to mention Lamb's name without being prompted. "Cross will appreciate that." "She'll appreciate it even more when Lamb makes a run for it," I said, "because then we'll have a better idea of where he's headed." Cross sent a text message 10 minutes later. Lamb folded. "Meeting me at 6. You didn't get this from me." I felt something that wasn't relief exactly. It was possibility wearing boots. 518 Nadia called. She almost never calls. "I need you at the ER," she said urgently. "Now." We ran a red light on 12th, justifying it with the thought that I'd saved enough lives to be granted a single transgression. Jane Doe, Anna Rose, was awake. She looked even smaller with her eyes open, as if consciousness itself had somehow diminished her physical presence. The ligature scars on her wrists were old wounds. The bruises on her ribs were far more recent. Cross stood at the bedside with a recorder and an air of forced composure, a patience that had learned to masquerade as indifference. "Anna," I said softly, approaching the bed. "I'm Mara. We spoke earlier when you were under the influence." She blinked, then gave a single nod, as if agreeing to the unspoken terms of being observed. Cross motioned me to the opposite side of the bed. "She asked for you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Me?" I said, surprised. "Me," Anna whispered, her voice raspy. "You look like..." She took a shallow breath that seemed to cause her pain. "You look like the woman in the picture on the wall in the clinic." "Stacy." My throat felt tight, as if it had been stitched closed. "She signed people in," Anna said, her gaze unfocused. "She made jokes. She told me the weather would change." Cross remained motionless, her expression carefully neutral. "Tell us about the clinic," she prompted, her voice gentle but firm. Anna's words came slowly, like small boats navigating a treacherous current. "They gave girls cards. Said we could use them for rides and rooms. Said we were helping other patients get care by balancing the books. Said we were part of a network. If we brought other girls, the card got more money." "Who told you this?" Cross asked, her voice sharp and precise. "A woman named Becca. Brown hair. A smile like a teacher who wants to help you cheat. A man named Mark. Fancy shoes. A doctor who never touched me. Hollowell. He said he was proud I was taking control. Cross's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. When did this happen? Years, Anna said, her voice fading. On and off. When I got clean, I stopped. When I needed a place to sleep that wasn't the shelter, I started again. How did you end up by the river? I asked, my voice gentle and soothing. I found a ledger, she said, and I felt a sense of recognition, as if the universe had just clicked into alignment. Becca kept one old book as a joke, said she liked the feel of paper. It had names. Mine other girls. Cash-out dates. I took it. I was going to bring it to the police. Then a man came to my room. He said he wanted to help carry it. He pushed me. I hit my head. Woke up wet. Cross's eyes were ice-cold, winter-clear. Describe the man. Tall, Anna said, her voice trembling. Umbrella. Teeth too white. We had our constellation of key players. The lines connecting the stars were already beginning to glow. Stacy, I said, unable to restrain myself. Did she work there? Anna shook her head, then winced in pain. She smiled too much to be on payroll. She was like me. She said she could get a check that would fix something. She stopped coming. Then there were photos of her in the office, with words under them. Don't serve. The room tilted slightly. I gripped the bed rail to steady myself. Cross touched my elbow, not to offer comfort but to anchor me to reality. We'll take your statement formally, she said to Anna. We'll protect you. Anna's smile was a broken thing, a scar that had learned to mimic politeness. No one protects girls like me, she said, her voice flat. But I like the way you say it. We'll try, Cross said, and there was enough sincerity in her voice to make it a promise. Outside the room, the corridor hummed with the subdued energy of a hospital, filled with people rushing to important destinations. Lamb at 6, Cross said, her voice brisk. I'll tear him apart. You two do nothing that gets you killed or sued for at least 3 hours. What if doing nothing gets us both killed? I asked. Then do less, she said, without a trace of humor. We didn't listen. We walked down to the river. It wasn't a performance. It was necessary. The Hawthorne Bridge felt like a point of origin, a place where things had started and apparently would continue to start. The water flowed with indifferent persistence. The city pretended to be permanent. The sky practiced a bruise-colored hue that no one deserved. We leaned against the railing, trying to appear casual and failing. Stacy was on a wall labeled "Don't serve," I said, my voice barely audible. That means she knew something. Or she refused something. Or both. It means she was inconvenient, Evan said, his face grim. Inconvenient girls don't get served. They get washed away. Say her name, I insisted. Stacy, he said, his voice heavy. We stood in silence for a moment, letting the name settle. An SUV rolled onto the bridge, a memory made real. It didn't stop. It passed. The umbrella man was in the passenger seat. He looked directly at us. He didn't smile. Tonight, Evan said, his voice flat. It ends or it goes underground. We can follow it either way, but the price changes. I can pay, I said. I know, he said. My phone vibrated with a number I didn't recognize. I answered it anyway, unable to completely extinguish the part of me that still hoped. A voice, flat and genderless, said, If you want to see your sister's last photo, go to Pier 17 at midnight. Come alone. The call ended abruptly. The water continued to flow. A seagull squawked in a language we pretended not to understand. Evan looked at me with the intensity of a man studying an X-ray. You're not going alone. I know, I said. I'm not stupid. You are something else entirely, he said. Meaner than I have to be, I said, and the rain began again, soft and relentless, as if the sky were practicing for the night ahead. Pier 17 wore night like an old boxer wore scars, without apology. Rusted bollards, ropes as thick as lies, sodium lights that turned the fog into something tangible. Midnight arrived with a tide that sounded like a crowd trying to remain unseen. We didn't come alone. We came smart. Cross knew about the message, not because I told her, though I did, but because she already had a car idling 2 blocks away, occupied by someone with the kind of patience only a detective's pension can afford. She told me she would be nowhere near the pier, which, in detective speak, meant she would be everywhere that mattered. Evan and I approached from opposite directions, as if we'd been choreographing this since childhood. At the edge of the pier, a shape waited, too still to be drunk, too careful to be honest. The umbrella man? No. Smaller. A woman in a pea coat that had seen better days. "Ms. Whitlow?" she called, her voice barely cutting through the wind. "I'm here," I said, stepping forward. She held up a phone, the screen illuminating a photo. My sister Stacy on a sidewalk I didn't recognize. Laughing, head thrown back, caught in mid-motion. Alive in a way the dead no longer get to be. The photo was dated 2 weeks after she disappeared. The date felt obscene, like a smile at a funeral. "Where did you get that?" I asked, my voice rough. "From a lockbox," the woman said. Up close, she was in her mid-30s. Her hair pulled back with the practical vanity of someone who couldn't afford mirrors. "I used to run errands for Bright River. Courier jobs. No questions, cash tips. After the foundation stiffed me on expenses, I kept a key. Call it a petty crime for research." "Research into what?" "Who not to trust." She glanced over my shoulder, saw only fog, and chose to believe in it. "The box is at Cascade Mutual East Bank branch. I couldn't open it alone. Needs 2 keys. I have one. The other is inside this." She held up a hollowed-out paperback, the kind you find in airport kiosks, designed to fill time and shelves. "No one looks at books anymore." "Some of us do," Evan said, emerging from the shadows with the kind of silence that suggests familiarity with alleys. "Who are you?" she asked, her body tensing, prepared to flee. "An accountant who ran out of patience," he said. She nodded, as if that were a known profession. "You should hurry," she said. "Men who smell like cologne and lawsuits have been watching the bank. They're about to get unhappier." "What's your name?" I asked. "Becca," she said, and the name landed like a stone in water. "The recruiter from Anna's story. Smile like a teacher who wants you to cheat." "Convenient," Evan said. "Correct," she said. "Also tired. I want out. This is me leaving a door open for someone else to use." Cross's voice came across my phone as a text, not a call. 2 shadows west side of pier. "Your friend is right. Move. Tomorrow morning," I said. "The bank opens at 9. "Make it 8:50, Becca said. "And bring coffee. The kind that tastes like punishment." She slid the paperback into my hand and vanished into the fog. A woman made of debts and decisions. We didn't wait for the shadows to get brave. We left the pier separately and together, each of us followed by a feeling and perhaps a car. At 8:50 the next morning, Cascade Mutual smelled like pens that you're not allowed to steal. The manager wore a tie that clearly hadn't chosen him. Our 2 keys made a sound like an argument reaching a compromise. The box slid free. Inside, a leather notebook, a USB drive in a Ziploc bag, 3 photos, and a key with a brass tag stamped Harbor Storage, Unit 312. The notebook was the ledger. Not a copy but the actual thing. Names, dates, amounts. The stiff pages were soft at the corners, worn smooth from being handled by people who didn't deserve paper. Stacy's name appeared 4 times, each entry paired with the same note. Patient access facilitation, friend pickup. On the last line beside her name in a different handwriting, a single note. No further, non-compliant. My throat tightened. They blacklisted her. They lost control of her, Evan said. Which is the same thing. One photo was the one Becca had shown me. Stacy laughing, the sun behind her like consent. Another showed a small room with 2 cots, medical carts, and an 4-pole that looked out of place. The third was a shot of a whiteboard with an address and a date. Warehouse, Dockside, 1103, inventory shift. Today was the 2nd. Cross met us in the parking lot. Her unmarked car wearing rain like freckles. She didn't handle the ledger with gloves. She handled it with respect. "We can search the storage unit," she said. "A warrant will take a day we don't have." "Then we don't have it," I said. Her eyes met mine. "Mara," I shook my head. "I'm done asking politely." "Welcome to the club," she muttered, and got back in her car to ruin a judge's morning in exactly the right way. We went to harbor storage. The manager there had been trained by the other manager. He wore the same tie, different color. Unit 312's lock surrendered to the brass key and a suggestion. Inside, boxes labeled with the self-serving lies of criminals, seasonal, office, donations. We cut one open. Medical wristbands spilled out like confetti for a parade no one should ever celebrate. Another box held prepaid cards. Another, burner phones. Another, manila folders with intake forms that used girls' names like currency. At the back under a tarp, a safe the size of a saint's coffin. "We can't lift that," I said. "We don't have to," Evan said. He knelt with a stethoscope he'd borrowed from my world and became very, very still. The tumblers whispered. After a minute that felt like 10, the safe sighed and gave up its secrets. Inside cash because some TV tropes are real. A hard drive identical to the one in Evan's bag. And a folder marked photos hold. The pictures inside were of girls and women, some smiling like people who had been told to, some not. On the back of each, an initial that matched ledger entries. Anna had been right. Becca had liked paper. At the very bottom lay a key nested in velvet, dramatic as jewelry. Safe deposit, Port River Bank. The banker's matryoshka doll. I almost laughed. I didn't. "We have enough to build a city of charges," Evan said. "We have enough to make them run," I said. "Sometimes running is a confession," he said. Cross's text, judge signed. "I'm 5 minutes out. Don't get caught holding Santa's bag." We left with nothing but photos taken with hands that shook in a controlled way. The storage door rolled down like a curtain. The day had the decency to be gray while we learned to breathe around what we'd found. Cross's team hit Bright River at 3 p.m. with the kind of politeness that requires battering rams in reserve. Computers into crates, files into bags, people into rooms with chairs that make you reconsider posture. Hollowell's office at the hospital received a separate visit dressed in administrative courtesy and probable cause. By dusk, Mark Lamb had loosened more than his tie. Cross said he'd reconsidered his risk profile, which is cop speak for he talked until his throat learned mercy. He'd named Calder twice, Hollowell once, and Becca in the past tense. He claimed the foundation's facilitation fees had evolved into a pipeline for laundering. First favors, then cash, then people. He said the clinic on SC 12th was a rotating shell. He said the warehouse by the docks was storage for outreach supplies. He didn't smile when he said it. "He's slippery," Cross said over the hood of her car, rain-snaring streetlight. "But slippery men leave trails. We'll follow one to Calder tonight." "Then we're with you," I said. "You're at home," she said. "Where you will sit still and not be brave unless your apartment catches fire. In which case you may be brave about an extinguisher." "I don't do sitting," I said. "You'll try," she said, because she lives on the border between insistence and affection. I tried. I truly did. The apartment felt inhabited by every version of me that had ever made a bad decision. I made tea I didn't drink. I stared at the space where my sister's photo had been. I checked the lock 3 times. The rain traced the window like a finger learning Braille. Evan stopped answering texts at 8:27 p.m. Not like him. Not when we were living in the kind of hour where silence means a verdict. I called. Once. Twice. Voicemail wearing politeness like a mask. I called Nadia. She answered on the first ring. "He's not with me," she said before I asked. "Cross." "On a raid," I said. "Location redacted." "Then let me try something," she said. "Give me 20 minutes. "I can give you 10, I said. 9 minutes later my phone lit with Nadia's name and a map pin. Old Mill Lofts, Unit 402. I had IT ping the last place Evan's phone spoke to a tower before it went into its witness protection program, she said. Then I remembered he turned off his phone. But his laptop? That pings Wi-Fi when it's hungry. There's an open network at Old Mill. You didn't hear this from me. I never hear anything from you, I said, which is hospital for I love you more than caffeine. The Old Mill lofts were what happens when developers apologize to history with reclaimed wood and inflated rent. I took the stairs because the elevator smelled like lemons and hubris. Unit 402's door was ajar like a mouth agape after learning a hard truth. Inside. An empty living room, a scuff mark across the hardwood floor suggesting a struggle, a chair knocked over, and a coffee mug on its side, its contents bleeding into the floor. No Evan. On the kitchen island, a single Polaroid face down. I turned it over. It was a picture of me on the Hawthorne Bridge at noon, taken from a distance that felt intrusive. 3 words were written in block letters: sit, stay, heal. There was another smell besides coffee, something industrial, sweet, and unsettling. Chloroform? I'd watched enough TV to mistrust my nose, but I trusted the knot forming in my stomach. I trusted the smear of dried blood on the chair leg. I called cross. Don't move, she said. I hate that phrase. Then hate it there, she said, and hung up because other lives needed her. I did not move. I walked my anger around inside my skin. It wore out quickly, asked for water and sat down. Nadia arrived before cross because hospitals are closer to everything. She took in the room like a triage nurse. Doors, exits, resources, fluids. She crouched under the island, then stood with a blink. Camera, she said. Tiny. New. Someone wanted to see who came looking. Are we on a feed? Not anymore, she said, pulling off the lens and disabling it. Cross arrived with 2 uniformed officers and a look that made the word sorry redundant. Calder wasn't at the warehouse, she said. He was here. He took Evan, I said. Or paid someone to, she said. That man doesn't touch his own doorknobs. I handed her the Polaroid. She read the words aloud like a curse. Heal, she repeated. He thinks he's charming. He thinks he's already won, I said. Men like that think every inning is the last, she said. We teach them extra innings exist. We swept the unit, being careful not to contaminate the scene. In the hall, Cross put a hand on my shoulder, brief and heavy as a verdict. We'll find him. You say that to families, I said. I say it until it's true, she said. The rain on the window became a grid, a veil, a lattice. I'd never wanted the sky to stop raining more, and I'd never needed it to continue this badly. I confronted Hollowell at noon the next day in a hallway he had always owned. Sunlight poured through the atrium like undeserved forgiveness. He was flanked by 2 vice presidents wearing ties that looked like leashes. Dr. Hollowell, I said. You're a hard man to avoid. You've been practicing, he said, dismissing the VPs with a look as gentle as a hammer. Evan is missing, I said. He was taken from a condo you control through a shell company that pays your daughter's roommate to collect rents. He didn't blink. That's a very imaginative sentence. The foundation is under investigation, I said. Your Bright River darling has fleas. Lamb is singing. Becca is tired. The storage unit was a piñata. How many more metaphors do you need before you step aside and stop pretending you're weather and not a man with decisions? Ms. Whitlow, he said, his tone pitying. Idealism is a fine garnish. It is not a meal. The work we do here saves lives. The money that moves through Bright River paid for equipment for travel, for hotel rooms for rural cancer patients who would otherwise sleep in their cars. Do you want to audit the trauma bay while a child waits for a bed? I want to stop paying criminals to carry your moral debt, I said. I want to stop seeing girls' names used like coupons in a store that sells dignity. He leaned in close enough for me to count the threads in his collar. You don't understand scale, he said. Every large thing is dirty. Your outrage is precious because it's small. My outrage is effective because it knows how to survive, I said. Where is Calder? I don't know. he said, and this time the lie had teeth. He doesn't answer to me. But you made him necessary, I said. I made the lights stay on, he said. Then you can watch them go off, I said, and walked away before he could practice a sentence on me that I would regret remembering. In the stairwell I let my hands shake. Nadia found me there because she keeps a map of where I'm likely to break. I pulled something from procurement, she said. Small ugly. A delivery scheduled for Dockside Warehouse 3 tonight. Manifest says linens and cots. The signature is a smear, but the time is specific. That's inventory shift, I said, showing her the photo from the safe deposit box. Same handwriting as the whiteboard. Then that's where Evan will be, or where they'll move him past, she said. Cross. She'll say wait for the warrant, Nadia said. She'll say wait for backup, wait for sunlight, wait for this rain to decide who it wants to become. She'll be right. And we're going anyway, I said. Nadia's smile was anything but kind. Of course we are. We staged the way people who've watched too many heist movies stage. Dad's truck is a decoy, my Corolla. Here's the rewritten version of the provided text. Aiming for a Diane Jai and Mo Rong Nay style while ensuring it sounds natural to an American English speaker. We headed for the exit. Nadia was dressed in dark clothes, which made her seem almost like a ghost, a fleeting rumor. I was carrying a med kit, heavy enough to feel like a real source of hope. Cross was aware of things but also not fully in the loop. I'd left her a message that walked the line between a confession and an invitation. Dockside Warehouse 3 had LD Calder Logistics stenciled on it. The letters faded to a color that screamed denial. The chain-link fence surrounding the lot looked like a bracelet on a wrist that had been grabbed a little too roughly in the past. We found a section of the fence that was loose enough to suggest an employee who wasn't a big fan of following all the rules. Inside, the air hung thick with the smells of canvas, dampness, oil, and unspoken arguments. Rows of cots were folded and stacked neatly, like folded-up apologies. Pallets were wrapped in plastic, but the plastic didn't really hide anything. In one corner there was a small room built inside the larger warehouse like a guilty conscience. Plywood walls, a single door, and no windows at all. Office, Nadia mouthed, pointing towards it. From the catwalk high above, we could hear footsteps tracing a slow, arcing path. We froze in place, holding our breath. 2 men walked past with clipboards and expressions of deep boredom on their faces. It wasn't Calder. It wasn't the umbrella man. These were just guys hired to be patient. We moved again once they were gone and out of sight. Nadia picked the lock on the office door with a hairpin, because sometimes life really does play into the old cliches. Inside the office. A desk, a metal filing cabinet, a humming mini-fridge, and a cheap camera mounted on a tripod, aimed directly at the door. The desk was covered with invoices for linens and medical supplies being shipped between shell companies, like money laundering had decided to go to summer camp. The cabinet held zip ties, duct tape, and a taser that looked like it had learned the hard way that it wasn't as powerful as it thought it was. Underneath a stack of forms stamped Bright River Outreach, there was a photograph, another picture of me standing outside my building yesterday, taken from across the street. They really loved their Polaroids. They really loved reminding you that they were always watching you. Nadia touched my sleeve, drawing my attention. Her eyes shifted to the floor. A smear of blood led from the desk to a scuffed-up area where a chair had clearly been dragged. Men had sat here with other men. Decisions had been made here, decisions that were pretending to be about logistics and nothing more. A horn blared outside, piercing the silence. 11:20 p.m. The roll-up door of the warehouse groaned as it began to open. A box truck backed in, beeping the way trucks do when they seem to be asking for forgiveness for taking up so much space. We slipped into the shadows behind a stack of cots, trying to be as quiet as possible. 2 men hopped down from the truck. A third person stayed in the cab, a silhouette with the brim of his hat pulled low. The 2 men opened the back of the truck and started unloading boxes labeled linens, which clinked together in a way that suggested they had never actually encountered any fabric. A voice drifted from the cab of the truck. It was smooth with a hint of amusement. I'd never heard it before, but I recognized the underlying structure, the confidence. Careful, it said. Break the plates, and I'll have to invite you to dinner. Calder. He was smaller in stature than his legend, but even more dangerous in person. Suits always managed to find the men who fit them just right. His suit fit him like a second skin, one that had lasted longer than the first. He stepped down from the truck without even bothering to look around, because men who think they own the night don't tend to believe in having perimeters. "Where's our guest?" he asked, his voice carrying in the cavernous space. "You thought you could steal from me and give the story to some girl who collects broken sisters." The lights went out, plunging the warehouse into darkness. The warehouse seemed to inhale all the light. Men swore in a chorus of different dialects, but all of them meant the same thing. We are not in control anymore. Nadia was already moving along the catwalk, heading towards the service ladder at the far end. I heard the quiet thump as she landed on the floor, followed by the slicing sound of a box cutter meeting plastic. The clinking sound that followed was the truth hidden inside the boxes of linens. Metal plates, surgical instruments clean and sterile. Not donations but inventory for a clinic that had somehow never learned to be a clinic. I hit the shutoff switch for the roll-up door too. The motor stalled, protesting the sudden stop. Metal groaned and complained. The truck wasn't going to leave without a fight. Down in the office there was a scuffle. A body slammed against a wall. It could have been Evan, or it could have been the man whose job used to be curiosity. It was impossible to tell in the darkness. I slid along the catwalk until I had a clear line of sight to the office door. Gun. No. I am a nurse, not a soldier. I carry tape, a penlight, and the ability to make a room choose me, to make people trust me. "Hey!" I shouted into the darkness. It was idiotic, a completely ridiculous thing to do. But it was also perfect. Two heads snapped upwards, searching for the source of the sound. Moving lights, flashlights, phone screens, in their hands turned their faces into grotesque masks. "Who's there?" someone yelled, which will always be my favorite example of a bad question to ask. Nadia used the distraction and the echo to get to the office door. In the ensuing confusion, the door opened, then slammed shut again. A yell followed by a grunt. Calder's voice, now crisp and sharp. "Find the breaker." One of the men peeled off from the group and ran towards the back panel, trying to restore the power. I tipped over a shelving unit with my shoulder and a muttered apology. It went down in a polite avalanche of boxes and supplies, a mess that would take him at least a minute to sort out. "Police!" A voice boomed from the lot outside. "Cross." The sound of sirens, learning the map of the neighborhood as they raced towards us. Calder didn't run. Course he didn't run. He stepped out of the office and raised his hands in the air, like a philanthropist accepting an award for fiscal responsibility. "Gentlemen," he called out, his voice calm and controlled. "Be calm." He lied beautifully. Men who can lie that well can keep their shoes clean even in a flood. His eyes flicked upwards, searching. He saw me. He smiled, the way a wolf might smile the first time it sees its own reflection in a mirror. "Ms. Whitlow," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Bridges suit you." My mouth moved without my conscious consent. "Water suits you," I retorted. "Let's see if you can breathe it." Cross came bursting through the side door like Consequence with a warrant in her hand. Officers fanned out, securing the perimeter. Commands layered the air with new rules and restrictions. The lights flickered back on, as if offended by the sudden darkness. Calder didn't look bothered or concerned. He actually looked entertained by the whole thing. He was still smiling when they put the handcuffs on him, as if he'd just won some argument that I hadn't even been aware we were having. They brought Evan out of the office. His face was the color of regret, and he was walking as if he'd borrowed a few ribs from a much smaller man, but he was walking nonetheless. When he saw me, he exhaled a laugh that sounded both relieved and incredibly weary. "Late," he said, his voice raspy. "Traffic," I said, offering a weak excuse. He let the paramedics take care of the small things, because he respects people who know how to do their jobs. Cross stood over Calder, watching him the way a woman might watch a pot burning on the stove, trying to decide whether it's worth it to save the pan. Hollowell. I asked her, curious about the fallout. Home, she said, with a hint of disdain in her voice. For now anyway. His counsel is busy mixing words and water, trying to make it all sound innocent. Becca. Gone, she said. Whether she had help or did it on her own, I don't know. Lamb is writing his memoir in exchange for not having to write license plates from a prison yard. And Nadia? I asked, turning to look for her, only to see her sitting on a pallet, breathing too quickly. There was a fresh bruise on her cheek, in the distinct shape of a shoulder that hadn't wanted to be a shoulder. What happened? I asked, kneeling down beside her, concerned. Met a crate that doesn't respect personal space, she said, trying to downplay it. I'm fine. But she wasn't, not exactly. She would be, eventually. I pressed some ice into a towel and handed her the makeshift compress, a gesture of competency in a situation that felt anything but competent. She took it, muttering, Tell me I at least managed to get a license plate out of this. You did, she said to herself, remembering. From the truck.
Ore 913 UHX.
Cross's pen caught the numbers, writing them down with a speed that felt like gratitude. We didn't sleep that night. The night had more work for us than we had dreams. The license plate led to a shell company, which was registered to another shell company, which was finally registered to an address that belonged to a mailbox store. The clerk at the store recognized the umbrella man's handwriting, and the impatience he always displayed when he was tipping. Cross's people pulled video from 3 different angles and 1 mirror, and they built a path that ended at Warehouse 7, farther down the docks, deeper into the part of the city that still believed in keeping secrets. We planned the sting in a room that made the coffee taste like pure strategy. Whiteboard. Arrows. Names that felt less like fiction with each line that was drawn. Cross ran the operation with her steady, pitiless grace. You, she said to me, pointing a finger. Do not come. I'm coming, I said, refusing to be left behind. You are not sworn, she said, reminding me that I wasn't an official member of law enforcement. I am sworn to the living, I retorted, thinking of the people who needed our help. Evan, his ribs wrapped tightly, his face stripped of any color that didn't naturally belong there, sat quietly, like a man trying to decide whether it's worth arguing with a hurricane. She comes as medical, he said, stating the obvious. We both know the odds of that being necessary are north of comfortable. Cross's jaw worked, a sign that she was still considering her options. You'll stay behind the second line, she said finally, setting the ground rules. You move only when I tell you to. I move when someone bleeds, I said, making my priorities clear. Same thing tonight, she said, and her small, almost imperceptible smile gave me permission to be exactly who I'd always been. Warehouse 7 held more of the same horrors, which is how you know a conspiracy has become a system, not just a series of improvised events. Cots, boxes, ledgers, blank and ready to be filled with names. A back room with a wall that wasn't really a wall. Behind it, a space that no permit had ever even heard of, 5 medical cots, 2 4-poles, a centrifuge, a mini-lab with enough supplies to analyze blood, and a locked refrigerator with an inventory log that listed women as if they were ingredients in a recipe. Cross had all the best locksmiths in the world on speed dial. The fridge gave up its codes only reluctantly. Inside, vials labeled with initials, dates, and cryptic notes. H/H, clear, A+. No. Some looked like they contained blood. Some looked like they contained nothing recognizable. All of them looked like concentrated power. Organizing the market, Evan said softly, his voice filled with disgust. Mapping out who is useful for what and when. I wanted to throw up, but instead I started taking photos because sometimes coping is a sequence of actions, not a perfectly formed shape. The wall of photos was there, too, updated since we'd last seen it at the storage unit. Girls, women, a few men. Notes scrawled beneath the pictures. Reliable, finder, unreliable, don't serve, gone. In the middle of the wall, my sister. 2 photos. One of her laughing on the sidewalk. Another taken later with her eyes wary and her hair cut shorter. The word "no" scrawled across the bottom in a handwriting I didn't recognize. Who wrote that? I whispered, my voice barely audible. Someone who wanted to keep her alive, Evan said. His voice filled with a sadness that mirrored my own. Footsteps. Not ours. A team moving with purposeful care, knowing exactly what they were doing. Cross raised a fist, signaling us to stop. We stilled, holding our breath. The door on the far side of the room opened. The umbrella man entered first, without his umbrella, only the cold, calculating expression that had once been framed by it. Behind him, two new men who had the kind of muscles that live on retainer, ready to be deployed at a moment's notice. Inventory shift, the umbrella man said to the empty room, as if he were reciting a prayer for people who measured piety in the number of boxes moved per hour. Cross flowed into action. The sting was quiet and almost graceful, a testament to their training. Men on men, hands on wrists, the practiced choreography of unmaking the situation. The umbrella man moved faster than his shoes would have suggested. He made it to the door, trying to escape. Evan intercepted him, moving with the kind of economy that only long-held fear can teach. They struggled for 7 seconds and 20 years. I counted both, the time stretching and compressing in my mind. Evan's ribs protested, reminding him of their recent injuries. The umbrella man's knee remembered the laws of physics, using them to his advantage. They broke apart. The umbrella man found the hallway, but an officer found the umbrella man. The floor found his face. It was disappointing but also correct, the inevitable outcome. When they put the handcuffs on him, he looked at me the way the tide might look at a sandcastle, resigned to its eventual fate. You really should have given the file back on the first day, he said, his voice surprisingly calm. The ocean has time. So do we, I said, watching as Cross read him his rights in a voice that could anchor ships, steady and unwavering. In the aftermath, the arrival of the ambulance felt like pure theater. No one had sustained any truly mortal damage. Nadia's bruise had deepened into a purple masterpiece. Evan let me check his dressing, resecuring the bandages around his ribs, because he wants me to have things that I can fix. Cross walked me to the door so we could perform the ritual of pacing and trying to decide whether it was time to cry. What now? I asked, feeling lost in the aftermath. Now we charge them with what I can prove, and we keep looking for what I can feel, she said, her voice determined. Hollowell will posture about process, pretending to be shocked and outraged. Calder will hire the kind of lawyer who uses words like alleged as punctuation, hoping to create enough doubt to muddy the waters. The umbrella man, she glanced back at the man who had once been so polite to me in the halls, will flip if he thinks the ocean is smaller than prison, if he thinks he can get a better deal by talking. And Stacy? I asked, my heart aching with the same question it had asked so many times before. I don't know how many times a heart can ask the same question and still manage to stay a heart. Cross's mouth softened, a rare display of emotion. We've got a new date and a new set of places to look. The photos put her in the network longer than we originally thought. Someone marked her NO, indicating that she was not to be used. Someone took Becca's ledger, trying to cover their tracks. Someone told Anna to run, giving her a chance at freedom. Those are people, not just pieces on a board. People leave heat, traces that we can follow. Heat cools, I said, feeling the weight of the task ahead of us. Not if I stand on it, she said, her eyes blazing with determination. Outside, the rain had the nerve to stop, as if to mock our efforts. The air felt scrubbed clean, indecently so. Evan and Nadia stood by the loading dock, looking like survivors at the edge of a photograph, forever marked by what they had endured. Dad's truck pulled in, the noise of the engine offending the very concept of stealth. He stepped out, carrying a thermos and a bag of something fried. You look like people who forgot to eat justice with a side of starch, he said, handing me a paper boat filled with fries that tasted like both memory and salt. Always, I said, accepting the offering. Back at my apartment, I put the laughing photo of Stacy back on the mantel, where the first one had been. It wasn't absolution, a way to make up for what had happened. It was geography, a way to mark where we were in the long and difficult journey. Evan sat on the couch, looking like a man who had won a small war, only to find that the victory was far less satisfying than he had imagined it would be. "Tomorrow," he said, stating the obvious. "Tomorrow," I echoed, agreeing to face whatever the new day would bring. We didn't talk about the bridge, the place where this had all started. We didn't have to. We were already on it, committed to seeing it through to the end. Calder's legal team filed motions that sounded like silk trying to strangle a solid fact. Hollowell held a press conference that tasted like pure antiseptic. "We are shocked," he stated, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "We will cooperate fully with the authorities," he promised. Any irregularities that may have occurred were the actions of a few bad actors working outside of established protocols. He was wearing a navy suit and an expression of carefully cultivated remorse. The hospital backdrop was the same one they always use for their philanthropy announcements and flu shot PSAs. Cross watched the clip first without sound, then with it, analyzing every nuance of his performance. "He's buying time," she concluded, her voice grim. "Time buys lawyers, and good lawyers can make a lot of problems disappear." We weren't about to give him much time to work with. Nadia brought me 5 documents with Hollowell's cheerful scrawl on them. 3 thank you notes written on Magnolia stationery, bless him, a post-it note pulled from a committee packet, and a signed internal memo authorizing overtime for surge staffing. The same distinct H, the same looping ls, the same peculiar habit of putting a slash through his 7s, as if Europe had somehow colonized his handwriting. The lab turned our vials into official affidavits, ready to be presented in court. Blood types were confirmed and cross-referenced to the initials in the ledger. A mini lab report showed traces of sedatives in 3 samples that should have contained nothing but signs of anemia, and the promise of hope. The transitional rooms, it turned out, were nothing more than makeshift medication beds. No doctor's orders. No charting. No consent obtained from the patients. Saying it out loud made the word battery blush with shame. In legal code it was assault, plain and simple. Cross assembled a charging document that was as heavy as a mid-sized dog, filled with evidence of their crimes. "By the time the indictments are handed down," she said, a hint of satisfaction in her voice, "they'll need a furniture dolly just to carry them all." I went home and sat under the old mariner's shirt that Evan still hadn't returned, letting the apartment teach me about grief that anticipates itself, the constant dread of what might still be to come. Stacy's photos dominated the mantelpiece. The laughing one and the wary one took turns making me believe conflicting stories about her fate. Dad stopped by with a loaf of bread that tasted like someone else's childhood, a taste of simpler times. He ran a thumb along the frame of the photo and didn't bother asking me what I wanted him to say. "You find her, you find you," he said, not as if he were reciting a proverb, but with the weary wisdom of a man who had seen storms hit the same coastline more than once. At 11 p.m., my phone vibrated with a number that wasn't on any parole list. I answered it out of habit and a sudden pang of hunger, hoping for some kind of sign. "Miss Whitlow," a voice said on the other end of the line. It wasn't Calder. It wasn't the umbrella man. It was a woman, older, with a smoker's gravelly voice that carried the weight of authority. "You don't know me. I work in compliance. Real compliance, the kind that makes friends slowly and carefully. There's something you should see." "Who are you?" I asked, wary of the unknown caller. "Someone who's been ignored by men who think my meetings are optional," she said, a hint of bitterness creeping into her voice. "Check your email in 10 minutes. And don't get any sleep tonight." The attachment arrived in my inbox like a mistake that was desperately searching for a home. A scanned copy of an internal audit from 3 years ago. It flagged several Bright River disbursements that didn't align with their stated mission outcomes, raising red flags about their financial practices. It used bureaucratic phrases like insufficient controls, concentrated authority, and vendor overlap, politely hinting at the possibility of fraud. It specifically named Calder Logistics as a potential area of concern. It politely requested an executive review to be conducted by G. Hollowell himself. At the bottom of the document, a note was scrawled in the same neat handwriting. dismissing the recommendation. Handled. No further action required. I stared at the document until the words lost all meaning and simply became the shape of a man who thinks receipts are entirely optional. A man who believes he's above the law. I immediately forwarded the file to Cross and Nadia, knowing they would understand the importance of this discovery. Evan was included in the group text as well. He responded first, his message short and to the point. Meet. Bridge. Cross responded almost immediately. No. Too exposed. Too risky. Evan replied. Exactly. If they want theater, we sell tickets. We control the stage. My thumbs typed out a response before my better judgment had even managed to get out of bed. Midnight. East Sidewalk. Hawthorne Bridge. Dad's truck keys looked at me from their hook near the door, as if they knew exactly what their role was in all of this. I left a note on the table, just in case the apartment somehow managed to outlive me. If I'm not back by 2 a.m., call Cross, then set the ocean on fire. The Hawthorne Bridge had played host to far too many of our beginnings to still be considered innocent. Midnight draped it in steel and compromise, the city lights reflecting off the cold metal. The river below moved like a muscle trying to decide whether or not to flex, ready to spring into action. Evan arrived from the west, walking with a slight limp that he pretended was just a stylistic choice. Cross's unmarked car idled 2 blocks away, her patient sitting in the front seat while 2 uniformed officers in the back were learning how to become statues, stone-faced and unmoving. I leaned on the railing, the light rain tickling my skin. The smell of wet iron made it feel like the city was bleeding. Headlights appeared, not from an SUV, not a sedan, but a clean white hospital transport van. A logo magnet was slapped over the name, Ethics magnetically inverted. It stopped midway across the bridge as if indecision were perfectly acceptable. The sliding door opened. Hollowell stepped out into the rain without an umbrella. A gesture that almost tricked me into respecting him. Ms. Whitlow, he said, his tone set to chapel-like solemnity. Mr. Evan. This is unnecessary theatrics, says the man who brought props. I retorted, nodding toward the van. I asked you to call me if you found troubling patterns, he said, his voice measured. I asked you to let me fix them. You created them, I said, holding up the audit with his handwriting on it, handling it like a talisman that had lost its patience. He glanced at the paper, then back at me. Do you want me to lose this hospital? He asked, his voice low enough that the wind had to strain to eavesdrop. Because that is the choice you're making. We balance brutal budgets with duct tape and favors. This city asks us to do everything, and we have to move money through paths that aren't always paved. And people, Evan added, his voice firm. You moved people. I delegated, Hollowell corrected, his tone defensive. And I am deeply sorry if that delegation was abused. The handwriting in the authorizations is yours, I stated, holding my ground. The NO over my sister's photo is the only thing in this mess I trust. Hollowell's gaze slid to the river, like a man auditioning for absolution. Your sister was an adult, he said, his voice dripping with false regret. She made choices. He didn't finish his sentence because lightning borrowed the sky, and someone else borrowed our attention. The umbrella man stepped from the far side of the van, rain-flecked, with fresh bruises on his cuffs and a smile that had learned absolutely nothing. Everyone brought their favorite bridge, he quipped, his tone mocking. Cross moved swiftly. She stepped from the shadows with 2 uniforms and a warrant that had yearned to be a sword its whole life. Dr. Hollowell, she announced, her voice unwavering. You are under arrest for fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, and accessory to battery. We have you on authorizations, on audits you ignored, on rooms you pretended not to see. Hollowell exhaled, not surprised, merely disappointed that the world had the audacity to follow its own rules. Detective, he said, his voice laced with condescension. You're making a mistake that will cost lives. Not the ones you priced, she retorted, her gaze unwavering. The umbrella man pivoted, calculating the geometry of surrender. And then he did what men who think they understand math often do. He lunged. Not at Cross but at me. Evan reacted even faster. He hit the umbrella man at the ribs in a tackle that the Yar would later admire for its technique. They slid on the wet steel of the bridge, the collision a study in gravity and bad choices. I grabbed the umbrella man's wrist. He rolled, wrenching free with a twist that taught my thumb a new language of pain. A blade flicked into his other hand, efficient, workmanlike, lacking any of the drama of the movies. He came up quickly, but Evan wasn't ready. The blade kissed his side, a shallow but hungry cut. I saw red bloom through the borrowed mariner's cotton of his shirt. It took the shape of an old fear and a new choice. Cross shouted a warning. A taser cracked the air into equations of pain. The umbrella man jerked, swore, stumbled but didn't fall. Lightning stitched the sky again. The river below seemed to learn a new harsh word. Hollowell stood very still, and I watched something in his face fail to hold its shape. Not guilt, not fear, but the unraveling of calculation. He looked smaller in the rain. Men like him often do when the weather refuses to obey their commands. "Drop it," Cross commanded, her voice now encompassing the entire bridge. The umbrella man looked at me and smiled the way boys do in grade school, when they learn that pulling a girl's hair makes them feel seen. He flicked the blade toward the river. It spun bright and bored and vanished into the darkness. "Hands," Cross ordered. He gave them slowly and deliberately. The cuffs went on like an old habit. I was already with Evan, fingers pressing gauze to his side, applying pressure light enough not to lie, firm enough to offer a promise of comfort. "Ribs?" I asked, my voice tight with concern. "Fine," he said, which meant decidedly not fine. "You okay?" "Later," I said. "We can afford the truth later." Hollowell allowed himself to be taken with the dignity of a dean forced to resign for something he calls a misunderstanding. As they walked him toward the transport van, he turned once, the rain painting him into an honesty he didn't want. "You're burning down a cathedral because you found a rat," he said, his voice dripping with resentment. "I'm lighting candles," I countered, my voice firm. "The rats hate that." Lightning said amen for us all. The indictments made a sound you couldn't hear until the papers were served. Calder's counsel called the charges overreach and promised to vigorously contest them. Hollowell posted bond on terms that would take a banker's rosary to understand. The umbrella man discovered the unexpected charm of cooperation. Cross didn't declare victory. She declared more work. "The network is a hydra," she explained, her voice determined. "We cut, we cauterize, we watch for regrowth." That night I walked the bridge alone because some ghosts refuse a +1. The rain paused, like a patient who wasn't quite sure the four-bag was empty. The city lights trembled on the surface of the water, as if someone had taught the river Morse code. I leaned on the cold railing and let all the versions of myself who had stood there file past. Footsteps approached from behind, not a surprise. "Evan." He moved more quietly now, because pain is a teacher with a soft voice. "You're supposed to be on a couch I would feel guilty sitting on," I said, my voice soft. "I'm on it in spirit," he said, his tone light. "And my spirit has poor posture." We stood together without needing to translate unspoken thoughts. "I thought there would be some speech," I said, my voice filled with a weary expectation. "From the world, a definitive sentence. Instead, it's a paragraph with too much subtext." "Paragraphs hold more truth than slogans," he replied, his voice gentle. "You almost died," I said, the words hanging heavy in the air. "I almost didn't," he countered, his voice equally serious. We let that statement sit at our feet like a wet dog. "What if she left?" I asked finally, voicing the question I'd avoided even in sleep. "What if Stacy saw the rot, saw me, saw Dad, saw the noise and the bills and the way our lives asked too much and she ran? What if Ino meant not safe with them but also not safe with us?" Evan put his palms on the rail, the way you do when you need your hands to decide not to shake. "Then we honor her decision," he said, his voice steady. "And we keep a light in the window anyway." "You talk like a man who's left before," I observed, my voice tinged with sadness. "I talk like a man who stayed and should have left," he confessed, his voice raw. "And the reverse. There's no clean arithmetic." Cross appeared at the midpoint of the bridge, as if bridges conjured her into existence. She didn't break our quiet, she borrowed it. "We found Becca," she announced, her voice calm, seatbelt dangling, hair damp. She was waiting, and she brought a lawyer who knows how to say proffer without flinching. She claims she kept Stacy off the roster after the NO. Says Stacy refused a transfer. Says she saw Stacy at the bus station with a woman older, short hair, red coat, laughing like she told a good joke. They left together. We're pulling surveillance from a time when cameras were dumber and men were lazier. "Alive," I said, tasting the past on a present tongue. Then, Cross clarified. "But it changes the vector. Your sister wasn't bagged and tagged like inventory. She made noise. We can look for noise." I exhaled something I hadn't realized I'd been holding for years. Relief is not clean. It has teeth and mud and a way of making you feel like you're wearing someone else's jacket. "Go home," Cross said gently. "Both of you. We do the rest in daytime." She left us with the road humming under our shoes like the city's private metronome. Evan nudged my shoulder with his adolescent and perfect. "Coffee?" he asked. "Bread," I countered. "Dad's. Even better," he said. We walked off the bridge like the versions of us from the first night had finally learned a better route. Trials take months because the world loves paper more than blood. Hollowell's attorneys spun webs out of delegated authority and rogue actors. Calder's team feigned boredom, then built doubt. The umbrella man wore a suit he didn't own and spoke cleanly about the men who paid him to practice cowardice. Becca trembled and told a story without excuses. Anna took the stand with Cross's hand a quiet inch from hers and said ledger into a courtroom that flinched. The authorizations with Hollowell's handwriting held up. The audit with Handled held up. The vials told a story chemistry refuses to lie about. The jurors did the math. Guilty bloomed one count at a time like bruises learning to fade. The hospital did not burn. It staggered. It apologized. It built new gates and hired compliance that bit. Donations dried up, then returned with conditions. Cross's captain accepted 2 commendations and a budget increase that wouldn't save anyone, then fought for one that might. Nadia got promoted to a title so long it wrapped twice around her badge. She framed the umbrella man's license plate screenshot on her desk, a saint's relic for a woman who worships process. Dad fixed the faucet in my kitchen and pretended the sound of steady water wasn't enough to make him cry at inopportune times. He started walking with a woman from the pier named Alma, who swore at crossword puzzles and liked his bread. We never found Stacy. Not her, but we found the red coat on camera at Union Station. We found the older woman, Caroline Reed, a community organizer and frequent flyer on every bus that left the city with other women in tow. We found proof Stacy left with her. We found no after that paid in the currency of certainty, but we found a postcard 3 months later, sent to Dad's house, postmarked 3 towns north with no return address. On the front, a lighthouse in fog. On the back, 5 words in a hand that used to leave notes on my mirror before school. The weather finally changed. Yes, I didn't show Cross right away. I let it sit on the mantel between the laughing photo and the wary one, like a bridge no engineer would bless. Then I brought it to the station, and we celebrated it without pretending it would stand up in court. Evan never went back to being anyone but Evan. He returned the mariner's shirt with a dry cleaning tag that made me laugh at the absurdity of capitalism. He rented the apartment below mine and learned to cook one dish very well on purpose so he could feed me without apology. Sometimes we kissed like a promise, sometimes we sat like a truce. He still counts exits. I still count breaths. We count on each other less like a vow and more like a practice. On the anniversary of the first night, the sky obliged us with rain. We drove the long way across the bridge and didn't pretend we weren't doing it on purpose. The city smelled like wet metal and fur again, and the river moved with the same stubborn grace. We parked the car and walked to the railing. "Say it," Evan said. "What?" I asked, even though I knew perfectly well. "That you would stop for me again," he said, his eyes searching mine. "Even if you'd met me on any other bridge." "I would," I said, my voice filled with conviction. "But I like this one." He smiled at the water as if it had kept a secret just for us. Me too, he said. My phone buzzed with a text from Cross. Another unit down. We pulled 3 girls and a boy from a clinic in the East County. Tell your father he bakes for detectives now. Attached was a photo of an evidence table and a single doodle in the corner of her legal pad. An O written 3 times, like a prayer that had learned to be an answer. We went home to